Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this session. This is Comprehensive Searching for Your Literature Review. This is with Susan Murphy from the University of Saskatchewan Library. My name is Merle Massey. I'm the coordinator of undergraduate research at the University of Saskatchewan. And this webinar is being recorded for the SURE program, so Student Undergraduate Research Experience. Thank you, Susan, for being with us today.
Oh, it's always my pleasure to give these kinds of presentations. I enjoy meeting all the students, even though I'm meeting you virtually now. But hopefully we can get some relationships going into the future. So for the sake of bandwidth, I know sometimes we all have challenges with that. Just leave your microphones off and your video off as well. I'm sure you're quite used to having people tell you that. If you do have questions, just put them in the chat box and Merle will be monitoring that for me. And then we'll go on from there. So comprehensive searching for your literature review. Before I start digging into what this is going to be all about, I just thought I'd take a moment and ask you, what databases have you used so far? What's your go-to when you need to do a literature search?
You can put that in the chat.
Yeah, I can see a little pop-up, psych, okay. Okay, Engineering Library, Google Scholar. Okay, yeah, so the USearch, lots of Google Scholar. Okay, so it looks like USearch is fairly standard go-to for people, as is Google Scholar. One of the things I'm not going to be talking about today are the specific databases. What I'm going to be talking to you about are techniques and things that you can think about when you're starting to do your searching, because there's a lot of preparatory work involved before you sit down and start putting terms into a database. I had an experience with a graduate student earlier this year. I won't disclose their discipline, but they came to me for help and they said, oh, I just thought you went into the database and put all your words together with ors in between. And I thought, okay, we've got a lot of learning to do here. That's not best practice, absolutely not. But hopefully what you'll take away from this session are some good techniques and some things that you need to think about before you sit down and start putting your terminology into the databases. So let's see if it's, okay, there we go. So what this session will do is help you develop a good search strategy, help you identify the best places to search for information, and help you enhance and refine your search strategy. I'm going to touch a little bit on evaluating sources of information, a little bit on saving your searches and managing your citations, and then just round things off with just a little bit of information about summarizing and synthesizing the information you find. So I wanted to start with this graphic about steps in a literature review. And mostly I'll be focusing on points 1 through 4. Points 5 and 6 will be dealt with in some of the other sessions that are going to be delivered as part of this program. But certainly the trickiest part of doing a literature review is to identify those key concepts in your research question and select the words that might correspond to those concepts. So the words aren't necessarily words you would select, but words that the author would select sometimes. So you need to be cautious about that. So starting at the beginning then, you want to develop your research topic and refine your research question. And I put a link on the screen to a research guide that we've developed in the library to help you develop your research topic. So you might want to have a look at that later and see if there's any information in there that would be useful to you at this point. But ultimately, you need to think about what is it you're going to research and identify what those key concepts are. Now, in the health sciences and sometimes in the sciences, you can use a framework like PICO to help identify some of your concepts. So what is your population, your problem, your patient? What is the intervention? Is it a comparison? And what are your outcomes? But you need to think about what is it I'm going to be searching. Ultimately, it's really, really important to identify and keep a record of the keywords and any terms that you're identifying for your concept. So you might need to do a bit of brainstorming. You might also want to do some background searching if you're not as familiar with your topic. Do some background searching in encyclopedias. You can do a quick Google search. You can look even at, heaven forbid, Wikipedia, and just it might give you some hints as to some of the key terms that you might be looking for, or some synonyms for some terms that you're thinking of. So it's good to do that background searching, because you want to understand the basics of your topic before you start looking for more in-depth literature on that topic. So identifying those synonyms for your keywords is also important, because you're potentially going to be looking at a variety of databases, and we always recommend that you search more than one database for your literature search. The databases use different terminology, and I'll be showing you a little exercise later that will help drive that point home. So you want to think outside the box. Don't just get stuck on the language that you've written down as this is my research topic. And just be aware of things like homonyms, words that have multiple meanings, because that might have the potential to pull up some things in your literature search that aren't on topic, and that it's good for you to understand, why am I getting these strange results? And it's, oh, because this article is talking about this word in this concept as opposed to the concept I was thinking of it in. So just be aware of that. You also want to think about what type of material you want to include in your literature search, and any time frames that might limit your searching. So are you looking at peer-reviewed articles? Are you able to include books or book chapters as part of your literature review? Are you looking at things like gray literature, which is often only findable through doing a Google search, or going to websites of organizations and associations that relate to your topic? Do you have a time limit? Most of the databases allow you to limit your searching by a time period. So you want to make sure you've got all those refinements, at least the basic ones, in place before you start your searching. Now I'm just showing you a little concept map here that can help you. Just using a table like this can help you to kind of sort out your searching. So your first concept, are there any synonyms to that? Your second concept, are there any synonyms? And it's really important to write this stuff down. And I know I'm a little older than you, and my mind is probably not as sharp as yours, but still, even at your age, it's good to write it down and document everything, so that you're not finding at some point in your literature searching, oh gee, what was that term I used, or I don't remember how I got this result that I ended up with. So writing it all down is really, really important. And you saw on the previous slide the ands and the ors with the Boolean operators. And I wouldn't be doing my duty as a librarian to overlook talking with you a little bit about Boolean operators. This is kind of the crux of your searching, and it's really important that you use these appropriately. Otherwise, you're going to run into some problems. And Boolean logic is something that we use every day in our lives when we're making any kind of decision, whether it's looking for a place to live, or buying a piece of clothing, choosing a movie, things of that nature. We're always thinking of, well, this or that, or this and this. So when you're using that or feature, the Boolean operator or, what you're doing is expanding your options. So again, if you're looking for a place to live and you don't care if it's an apartment or a suite in a house, you'll have a lot more listings that you can look at. If you use the and feature, like in the second part of the diagram, A and B, you're minimizing your options. So if it has to be an apartment and it has to be on a bus route because you don't have a vehicle, then all of a sudden your selection is much smaller. Your results are much, much smaller. There is a third Boolean operator that's out there, and we always say use that with a bit of caution, because what it's going to do is eliminate things that match both of those criteria. So in this case, again, looking for a place to live, you want an apartment, but not a basement suite. But there may be what you're going to do is eliminate the ones that meet both of those criteria, which might actually be something you're looking for. So you just want to be careful about that, especially with the literature, because you might find articles that deal with your topic and a topic you're not so much interested in, but it still does deal with your topic. So we always say, I don't want to say do not use not, but if you do think you want to use not, use it with a great deal of caution and awareness. And again, this is just kind of a fun library fact, nerdy library trivia, call it what you will. This is just a picture of George Boole, and he is the developer of Boolean logic. And I was in Ireland a few years ago at the University College of Cork, and I came across this bust, and I thought, oh, I just have to take a picture of it and put it into my instruction classes. So just so you're aware, Boolean logic was actually created by George Boole. He was a mathematician. So just some library trivia some night when you're, want to amaze your friends, you can tell them all about George Boole. Okay, moving on to the next step then. I'm just going to pause for a moment and ask if there are any questions anyone has. Anything that wasn't clear, anything you'd like me to speak a little more about. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I will move on then. So you're at the stage now where you've got your research topic, you've identified all your terminology. Now, where do you look for the information? And going to the library's webpage is your first starting point. We do have library research guides. They're located under Get Help. You can just see from the diagram. And we have these research guides for pretty much every subject that's being taught on this campus. So someone mentioned psychology, engineering, business, the various health sciences, whether it's pharmacy, whether it's veterinary medicine, sociology, history, education. We have research guides for each of those subject disciplines. And there's always going to be a link on those guides to a list of databases where you can find articles. And what we've done is we've pulled through our great long list of databases, the ones that are most relevant to those particular disciplines. So these research guides are really kind of a one-stop shopping for you. It gives you lots of guidance on using the literature in your particular discipline. Keep in mind that for some of you, you may be dealing with topics that are interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. So you may want to think about what literature might I also find this information in. So if you're dealing with a public health topic, and that's usually a good one where sometimes you have to get into the sociology literature or the psychology literature or even the economics literature. So just be aware of that and think about when you're thinking about your topic. Ultimately, if you do have lots of questions or you're not quite sure which database might be the best for you to use or databases, because I did say earlier, you probably want to use more than one database, I would invite you to contact the librarian for your subject area. And we do have librarians like myself who are aligned with the various subject areas. So for myself, I'm the librarian for veterinary medicine and kinesiology, and just for the next month or so, archaeology and anthropology. So we do have people that are subject experts in those areas, and they can help you with any aspect of your literature searching. Now, I've said a couple of times that you should be searching more than one database, and I just want to talk for a minute about why I keep saying that. Each database indexes a certain set of literature, a certain set of journals. No one database indexes every journal out there on a particular subject discipline. So each database, there'll be some overlap between databases, but each database will also have some unique content. So if you're doing a really thorough search, you want to make sure that you're picking up as much of the literature as possible. And the best way to do that is to search more than one database. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about types of databases. There are two basic types. One is the keyword database. So you're going to be searching the title, the abstract, sometimes the author field, sometimes any subject headings that the library or that the people who are creating the index have assigned to those articles. Sometimes quite often when you submit an article for publication, you're asked to identify some of the keywords of the article, and those are used in some of these databases to index the article. So keyword databases searches a lot of different places. And as I mentioned before, the terminology may vary with the databases. So I've just given you some examples like Agricola, Web of Science, Historical Abstracts, Academic Search Complete. Those are keyword database searching. Now, many of you mentioned when I did my initial question about what databases are you used to searching, many of you mentioned using USearch, which is on the front end of the library's webpage. Because you're doing higher level searching right now, I wouldn't recommend that you use that unilaterally for any of your searching. For the most part, it is geared towards students, undergraduate students who just need to find a handful of articles for a paper they're writing. So if you're doing a comprehensive literature search, you really should be using the subject databases for your discipline. Where USearch is really helpful, though, is if you don't know anything about a topic, or if you're dealing with one of those multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary topics, if you do a quick search in USearch and look at where, which journals the articles that you're finding are showing up in, that might help you to say, oh, I never thought to look in the sociology literature for this topic, but I'm seeing there's lots of literature there. So then you'd want to go to sociological abstracts and do some searching there. And again, as I mentioned, if you just need to find a couple of articles on a topic that are kind of good enough. But again, in your case, you're going to want to be finding the best literature out there. So I would say for the most part, you wouldn't want to be using USearch for your research this summer. The other type of database is a thesaurus or controlled vocabulary database. And these are quite powerful databases because it really helps hone in on pulling together all those synonyms that you needed to think about. It will tell you, we use this term in this database. So no matter what you type in, it'll redirect you to the proper term to use. So every reference or every article in the database has one or more of these predetermined subject headings. And then, as I say, these similar concepts are mapped to those headings. Okay, and I just given some examples. So APA PsycInfo, ABI Inform, Medline, Global Health, MLA International Bibliography, which is the English literature database. And ABI Inform is one of the business databases. So those are some of the databases that have this controlled vocabulary. Each one has their pros and cons for sure. With the keyword databases, the nice feature about using a keyword search, and you can certainly use keyword searching in the thesaurus and controlled vocabulary databases, and we recommend that you do that. We recommend you search both using the controlled vocabulary and using keyword searching, because one of the benefits of using keyword searching is that if your topic's fairly new, sometimes it can take a year or so for a control vocabulary term to be established in one of these databases. So the only way you're going to find the information is by using keywords. Sometimes as well, these are put together by humans. Humans make mistakes, so there might be a typo that somehow isn't picking up the article using the control vocabulary, but you might pick it up using keywords. So because you want to be doing comprehensive searching, when you're dealing with a control vocabulary database, it's best to use both that control vocabulary and keyword searching. And keyword searching gives you a little more flexibility in doing things like looking for different variations of a term, which I'll be talking about in a few minutes. So just to reemphasize the whole piece about language in databases, I'd just like you to type into the chat box what this image on the screen could be called. Yeah, lots of mobile phones showing up, cell phone, personal communication device, iPhone, lots of iPhones. So lots of different terms to describe this. And You would have to think about all of that if you were using a keyword database. And I will just say for a moment, Steve Jobs, yes, I will just say for a moment, I very much appreciate nobody typed into the chat box a really old cell phone, because that's kind of what it is. So I'll appreciate the fact that nobody said that, pointed that out. But that tells us, okay, there's different language that can be used to describe something as simple as something we use every day. What I've done is I've gone into 3 of the databases that have a thesaurus or controlled vocabulary, and I'm showing you how they use the different language. So in Medline, it is called a cell phone. In ABI Inform, which is a business database, they use cellular telephones. So if you were to type in cell phones in a database that didn't have a controlled vocabulary, you might run into some problems. If you type in cell phone in ABI Inform, it'll say, nope, we use cellular telephones. And API PsycInfo, the psychology database, uses mobile phones. So, this is a point of aggravation, I'm sure, for you, and certainly a point of aggravation for librarians. Like, really, people, can't you just all call it the same thing? But it is what it is, and that's why you need to be really flexible in your thinking and just be aware that the language may differ from database to database. So some searching tips and tricks, and these are mostly related to what you can do, with keyword searching. You can't do any of this with the control vocabulary searching, but you can certainly do this with keyword searching, and it's a way of expanding your results as well. So truncation is a thing. It will pick up plural or variant endings. So if you had a term like nurse, by truncating nurse after the S, you would pick up singular nurse, you would pick up nurses, nursing, nursemaid, so on and so forth. So truncation is great, but use it with some caution because it may pick up some terms that you don't really want. So you need to be really careful where you truncate. And if you truncate too narrowly, you're going to pick up all kinds of things that you don't want. If you're just interested in plural or singular forms of the word, I would just use the plural or singular forms of the words in your searching. I wouldn't truncate at that point. The little truncation symbol, here I'm showing it as an asterisk, but sometimes in some databases it's a question mark. And quite often there's a help screen within the database that can help you with that as well. Or there's examples when you go to do your searching. It'll give you some examples for doing that. Alternate spellings. So in addition to those synonyms, you have to be mindful of alternate spellings. In particular, your American versus British spellings, your ORs, OURs, your S's, your Z's, things of that nature. Because in some databases, it'll map it, whether you use one spelling or the other. In other databases, it won't. So just watch for that in your results. If you type in just one version of the term and you're finding both versions, great. But if you're not finding both versions, just be aware you may have to go back and redo your search using both versions, both spellings of the word. Wildcards, that's not used terribly often, but it is something to be aware of for word variations. And you can see in the example with women or woman, by using the wildcard, which in this case is a question mark, where the A or the E would be in that term, we'll pick up both variations of the term. So that's really great for when you have singular or plural terms that aren't spelled with just an S in the end to make the pluralization. Phrase searching, that's one that you probably will use fairly regularly, just using quotation marks around your terms, around your phrase. Quite often the databases are really quite literal. Technology is great, technology can be very intelligent, but with databases, sometimes they're very literal in reading left to right. And if you don't put those quotation marks around, what it's going to do is going to find, in this case, culture and safety, but they might not be tied together. They might be in two different places in the abstract or in the title and not really in the context that you're looking for. So searching these phrases using the quotation marks will tell the database, I want you to look for this as I'm showing it to you. So culture of safety, I want you to find that phrase. So it just, again, refines your search results a lot. The proximity or adjacency operator, it can either be an ADJ, could be the word near. In this case, there's a W. Again, the database help screens will help you determine that, or you can talk to your librarian about that. But you can say to it, the phrase searching, you're telling it, I want these words in this order as you see it. With the proximity or adjacency feature, you can say, I want the word heart within so many words of the word disease. Within one word, within 2 words, within 3 words, things of that nature. So again, it's a really nice way to manipulate the database if you're wanting a little bit of flexibility in the terminology you're searching for. So I'm going to pause right here because I've given you a lot of information and just see if there are any questions at this point.
We have a hand raised. Brooke, go ahead,
Okay,
unmute yourself.
Hi.
great.
So with the proximity adjacency one, we have to do both heart ADJ1 disease as well as the heart W1 disease?
No, those are just
Okay.
2 different examples of the way you could use it. So the W slash number is used, for example, in the Scopus database. The
Okay.
ADJ number is used in the OVID databases like Medline, in APA, PsycInfo, things of that nature. So it does vary from platform to platform, from database to database. I just wanted to give you some different examples of what it could look like.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Susan, we've also had a question from Jack. Is the PowerPoint itself going to be available to refer to? We are recording the session, just a reminder, and it will be uploaded to the Sure YouTube site. It'll be up to Susan if she's also willing to share their PowerPoint.
I'm quite happy to share my PowerPoints. And really and truly, I probably should put the little icon on it, but copy and paste, reuse it, repurpose it how you see fit. I'm good with that. These
That's
are no,
fantastic news.
these,
So yes, I will do both, Jack. I'll make sure that you guys
yeah,
all have the recording as well as the original PowerPoint.
absolutely. No, great questions. Thank you very much for those. Okay, I will move on then. One more searching tip and trick, limits. And I kind of left this one for the last because it's one that sometimes people like to use early on in their search. Right away, they want to put a limit such as a time, a date limit or a publication type limit, things of that nature. But I always recommend that you use it kind of at the end because you don't know how many results you're going to get in your search. And if you only have 20 results in your search, adding limits on like dates or publication types or age ranges or whatever the case may be, it's really not necessary. So that's how I always think of it as kind of the icing on the cake. If you just need that last little bit of refinement on your search, then think about using limits. One of the limits that I always caution people about using is most databases have a full text limit on them. And I always caution against using that because more often than not, that limits you to the full text that the database provider is providing free to you. That will eliminate all of the full text information that the library is subscribing to on your behalf that you will find in the database. So you're really reducing your full text options by using that full text limit. So I would say, avoid that one at all costs. And then of course, I always say, because this is where I often fall down in database searching, is if you get a 0 result, double check your typing, especially if you're using terminology that's fairly new to you, or if you're using a lot of technical terminology or scientific terminology. It's not uncommon that you might make a little typo. Happens to me all the time. My typing skills are probably pretty subpar. So that's just kind of an overarching thing. If you get a 0 result, definitely have a look at your typing. I just wanted to remind you as well, when you're in the databases, you will find with the yellow Find It button, that will tell you whether or not we have it available to you through the university library. Don't hesitate if we don't have it. Do not hesitate to submit an interlibrary loan request for the item. We can usually get it to you within within a few days now, because a lot of it's technologically facilitated. So we'll be able to get you that article in electronic form fairly quickly, certainly much quicker than the olden days where we had to send off a paper request to another library and they would send a photocopy of the article to us and then we'd have to put it in campus mail or mail it to you at your home. Oh my goodness, that can take weeks. But now we send off the requests electronically. They send us a PDF of the article. We let you know by email that it's ready, give you a little login and a password, and off you go and get the item from Interlibrary Loan. And it's a free service, and it's a really great way of getting information that we don't have available here at the University of Saskatchewan. So when you're being comprehensive, you will want to be mindful about not limiting yourself to just the resources we have available locally. You want to make sure you're getting information, the best information you can get, whether we have it here at the University of Saskatchewan or not. So that interlibrary loan service is really quite lovely. And I'll let you know that a lot of universities actually charge for interlibrary loans. We're still providing them free of charge here. So bonus for you. Okay, I've put this search on the screen. It's kind of a, oh my goodness moment, I'm sure. But I just wanted to show you kind of in context what can happen in a database or the kind of search that you might have to do. I don't want to say might have to do, but the kind of search that sometimes has to be done to be really comprehensive in a database where there is not a control vocabulary. Now, COVID-19, just in the past couple of months, has become a control vocabulary term in the Medline database, which is the big medical database. Up until that point, these are the kinds of synonyms that had to be used to try and find information on COVID-19 for really, really high-level searching. Really, really comprehensive searching. So a systematic review in this case. So this is just part of the strategy, but you can see how they've used phrase searching, severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, lots of different synonyms and spelling variations for COVID-19 with or without the dash, with 2019, et cetera, and then truncation, coronavirus and epidemic and so on. And you can see pandemic as well. So just to give you an idea of how complex searching can be when you're not able to use control vocabulary. So I don't mean to scare you by this, but I just wanted to show you that it can be quite complicated. So as I said before, searching more than one database, really, really important to do that. Searching both control vocabulary and keywords. And one of the things I haven't mentioned so far is searching one term at a time. And this is really important. And if you recall at the beginning of my presentation, I was talking about the student who thought you could just put, term 1 or term 2 or term 3 or term 4 all in a line in your search box. The disadvantage of that is that you don't know which of those terms is giving you the highest number of results. By searching each term at a time, you can assess, okay, this is definitely a term I want to include in my strategy. Oh, didn't get very many results for this. I might want to reconsider using this term. But what it also does is it gives you the opportunity to mix and match your terms in a variety of ways with your Boolean operators. So your ORing and your ANDing is much easier to do if you're just ORing and ANDing single terms together. You can choose to use some of the terms or not, or you can mix and match them in different ways to help enhance your search. So even though it might seem really tedious to do it that way, it is really important to do it that way, just to give yourself a better search result. So you've done your search, you've used some of these techniques, you've got your result. Did you get what you thought you were going to get? And I know other people might have something to say about this, but I usually say, if you get a result kind of 30 to 60, it's probably not a bad search, unless you're searching a very, very broad topic. So if you retrieved more or less than you expected, you want to think about that. is there some reason I'm not getting more results? Or is there some reason I'm getting way too many results? You may have to go back and refine your search. And that's something to think about. Nobody, not even the most experienced librarian, does the perfect search first time around. Okay, just be aware of that. It is an iterative process, lots of tweaking, because you don't really know how the literature is handling some of these topics. So you just want to be aware that it is a bit of a time-consuming process, but if you do it very methodically, documenting what you're doing it one step at a time, it's actually going to take you far less time to do it that way. What you can do if you aren't getting very many search results is you can look at the article abstract and the author keywords, because sometimes they'll give you some hints of some other synonyms that you never even thought about that you might want to go back and add to your search. So you go back and redo your search and add those terms in. Absolutely, it depends on how narrow or how broad your topic is. So you do want to be careful about that. But just some different options for you. Sometimes you have a very specific topic and you're not going to get a lot of information. Or if your topic is very new, it does take a lot of time for journal articles to get written and to get through the peer review process and to get published. So again, using COVID-19 as an example, it took quite a while to find actual peer-reviewed literature on that topic. There was a lot of gray literature coming out there that hadn't gone through a peer review process because people were desperate to get information out to the public, out to the researchers. So that was a real challenge that first year of the pandemic for librarians to help researchers find really good quality literature. There just wasn't a lot of it. Okay. The other thing we talk about too is snowballing. So this is another technique you can use. Hate to think about snow when we're already, we're just getting into spring, but it is what it is. If you're really having trouble finding enough relevant resources, most of the databases now have features like related documents, or kind of like what Amazon will do. If you like this, you might like that. So it gives you those kinds of hints. So you can use that as an option to find other articles on your topic. What you can also do is review reference lists or bibliographies of the relevant articles to find out what articles those authors used to write their paper, keeping in mind that will be slightly older literature, but that may be fine for your topic. You can also see, and again, the databases most often help facilitate this, where these articles have been cited. What other articles are citing the article you're looking at. Now that only works if the article you're looking at is a little bit older, because it takes time once that article is published, it takes time for people to read it and write and use it as a reference in the article they're writing. So if it's a year or two old, you might have a little more of a challenge finding out if it's been cited elsewhere. But if it's 10 years old, you should have lots of options to see who's citing that literature. Now, that's not to say they're citing it in a positive manner, but nonetheless, it could lead you to other useful information on your topic. The other thing you can do is if you consistently are seeing the works by a particular author coming up in your search results, you can go back and search that author's name as well to see if there's something else that they've been writing that for some reason did not get picked up in your search strategy. So those are kind of the, if you're really struggling, techniques. And I know I had a student earlier who was looking for something, kind of the first use of a particular concept. And it's really hard to find that in the literature. And we ended up finding a kind of an encyclopedia source that had references in it. And she was able to use those references to find older information from the 70s and so on that looked a lot more promising to giving her what she wanted. And I'm sorry, I saw there was a question, so I'll just pause. And Merle, if I could have you read that out, please.
To search an author, would you use the name databases or something like ORCID to be comprehensive?
I would use the databases.
Yeah, I
Not every
agree.
author has an ORCID ID, so that's a little trickier. And not every author, once they've established their ORCID ID, has gone back historically and put all of their, tagged all of their articles with their ORCID ID. So I still think right now you're better to just use the databases for that. But you
I
could certainly
absolutely
try
agree.
both. You could
Orchid,
certainly,
ResearchGate, there's all those other ones. Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of work on the author to make sure
yeah,
that you're keeping those updated and they're not as updated as a library would be.
yeah. And I will, full disclosure, I'm guilty of that. My most recent couple of articles are, you can find by my ORCID number. My older ones, no, I haven't tagged them yet. So shame on me, I guess. Okay. So I did mention a little bit earlier about gray literature searching, and I just want to review that with you because sometimes that may be the only source of information for you. So gray literature is information you're not going to find in the regular databases. You can find them using Google sometimes, or you might have to go to association or organization websites, look to see under, quite often they'll have a reports category or a publications category or resources drop down menu, and you can see what reports that they've published. These generally don't get picked up in indexing sources. Because they're never really actually published through the more traditional publishing venues. And the thing to watch out for gray literature is that it's generally not peer reviewed. So you need to look at it very carefully and hope that you can match up the information in a source like that to something that you can find in a peer reviewed publication. So they are much harder to find. For some disciplines, they do have kind of gray literature databases that can help with that, but not for all disciplines. So Google is probably your best bet in most cases, or like I say, going to the organization, the association, they might have their conference proceedings available on their website and things of that nature. And you might have to scour through those a little bit more intensely to find some information. So there are kind of been a change in what are considered sources of gray literature. Traditionally, they were more standard things like the conference proceedings, theses, position papers, government reports, things of that nature. But now blogs and toolkits and even PowerPoint presentations, pamphlets and fact sheets, they're being accepted as gray literature. But again, it's really, really important to look at who wrote them, why did they write them? Do they describe a particular biased opinion? So kind of take these ones with a grain of salt, but don't discard them as valuable information, because as in some cases, that might be all you can find on your topic. You just need to be very clear when you're talking about your methodology or when you're writing your paper to acknowledge that these are sources of gray literature, therefore they may represent they're not peer reviewed, they may represent some bias, etc., etc. So evaluating then, that's where this this CRAP test that we talk about fairly regularly comes in quite handy, especially for the gray literature resources. You want to look at things like the currency, the relevance, the authority, who wrote this, accuracy, and that's where being able to fact check against some peer-reviewed publications might be important. Are you finding consistent information across the literature? And why is the information existing? Is it to promote a particular person's viewpoint, or is it based on credible evidence? So that's just something that you can use. And it's kind of a handy little jingle, the CRAP test. Okay, we're going to remember that one for sure. The other thing to watch for, we're seeing a little bit more of this showing up in databases. And there's a lot of conversation right now amongst researchers, amongst librarians, about whether or not articles that are published in predatory journals should be included in databases. And like I say, there's lots of conversation going on right now. No real, people certainly have strong opinions one way or the other. But Predatory journal, what is that? Predatory journals and predatory publishers, they prey on people who are desperate to get their research published. And I get emails all the time. Merle, you probably get them as well, but it's publish in my journal. We can publish your article in 3 weeks. Well, that right there is a sign that there's no peer review process, or the peer review process is a little bit on the light side, because in order to go through a peer review process, it can take up to a year, if not longer, to have someone rigorously looking at your journal article, assessing it, following through on the science that you're presenting or the information you're presenting. So these predatory journals, they kind of dupe the unwary researcher into publishing with them. Sometimes they charge exorbitant prices or very little to have you publish. A lot of them are open access journals, so they're free on the web. They don't really have an archiving methodology, so your article could be there today and gone tomorrow. So they're very unstable. They're very fly by night, if you will. They're not very credible at all because they don't have that rigorous peer reviewed. And unfortunately, a lot of authors really get tricked in because they're just really desperate to get their papers published for their tenure and promotion. If they're an academic researcher, they need to have these publications, and they're not as careful about where they're submitting their articles. So generally speaking, if you get an email saying, and it's funny because my area of research is library science, and I get emails, publish in our business journal or publish in our science journal. No, I'm sorry, that's not my area of expertise. But I can almost guarantee you that if I submitted something to one of those journals, it would get accepted. So they're really not credible journals, but sometimes they do present as a credible journal, and you have to look quite hard to identify what some of the flags might be, red flags might be, to say, no, I think I'll pass on submitting an article. Sometimes another example is to submit your article, you just click on a link and you submit it that way. Well, you don't know where that article's going. Most credible journals will have a particular process for you to submit articles for consideration for publication. So they're really kind of sketchy journals.
One of the
And
advantages for undergraduate students is that most of you are going to be working with and submitting alongside your faculty, and they've been very well trained and they're quite aware of what's a predatory journal and what's not. Oftentimes they'll receive these emails that has a lot of misspellings,
yeah,
and that's often a big flag for these sorts of predatory journals. But yeah, so of course, the University of Saskatchewan has the Undergraduate Research Journal, so USurge, which is supported by my office and the library. They're not predatory, even though they're open access. They're an excellent journal and a place to put your undergraduate research work. But most of you will be publishing alongside your supervisor, so that'll be less.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We do get okay. We do get, there's a question about impact factor, and I'll get to that in a minute. We do get questions from faculty on occasion where they're just not quite sure. And that's what we're finding more and more, is that the whole predatory publishers, predatory journals forum is getting a little trickier to identify. So we do actually have on the library's website, under that research guides category, we have our subject guides, as I mentioned earlier, but we also have a guide about predatory publishers. So if you're really interested in that, I would encourage you to look at that guide, just so you're aware of what this is all about. So Merle, can I have you just read me that question again about impact factor?
Absolutely. If you have
Thank
time,
you.
can you explain impact factor? I hear this term a lot, but I'm not sure how it's calculated or how important it really is.
Well, that's a very good question, because depending on who you talk to, you will get a different answer. But generally speaking, the impact factor, and I don't quite know the calculations because sometimes it varies from journal to journal, but it gives you a sense of how impactful the article has been on other literature. So it takes into fact how many citations a particular author has had, et cetera, et cetera. Again, that's something with these predatory journals. Sometimes they will promote themselves as having a really high impact factor when in fact they have no impact factor at all. So it is one measure of dubious quality sometimes, but one measure of the prevalence, or not the prevalence, the status of a journal. So a lot of the high, the core journals that are really high-end journals will have fairly high impact factors. And it's kind of a horse and, the cart and the horse situation. Is it has high impact because people want to publish in that journal, but if we didn't get the higher end researchers publishing in that journal, the impact of that journal might not be as high. So and quite often only the higher producing researchers have the opportunity to publish in that journal. Newer researchers generally don't get accepted for publication in these journals. So it's kind of it's a bit of a testy area for some people as to whether or not impact factors should be considered as a criterion for assessing the value of a journal and assessing the value of an article in the journal. Okay, that's probably not as comprehensive an answer as you might have liked, but there is some information on that predatory journals, predatory publishing guide that talks a little more about impact factor if you wanted to read more on that. But it's just one measure of many to assessing the quality of a journal and the quality of an article. So we're getting close to our end time, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about saving your searches. Within most of the databases, you have an option to create an account of some sort so that you can save your search strategies. The advantage of doing that is that then, depending on the length of time you have for doing your research, you can rerun your strategy and pick up some newer information just before you publish your article. You just want to run it through again and make sure you haven't missed anything new and earth-shattering that's come out since you first ran your search. So that's a really, really valuable thing to have. And then you don't have to go back and manually type it all in again. Sometimes you can also create an alert, so the database will let you know if anything matches your search strategy that's come in since you created your search to begin with. So that's something that you want to think about. And then, of course, you can export your references into a Word document or a citation manager to reference later. So that's your search results. You can export them. And again, that varies from database to database as to how you do this, but just be aware that you can do this so that you don't have to do any manual work. With the citation managers, of course, citation managers to suggest. Well, that's on to my next slide then.
We are going to be giving a session in a couple of weeks on Zotero, just so you know. But yeah, Susan knows all about all of them.
Yeah, that's it's a tough question to answer, really, because it depends on what you're using the citation manager for. We do have a number of tools available: EndNote, Zotero, Mendeley, and as Merle just said, there will be a session on Zotero. And throughout the course of the year, quite often the library offers sessions on these management tools as well. But it really depends on what your end purpose is, because they vary in the number of citations they can hold. So EndNote, for example, you can get a free version of that holds a much smaller number of citations than the EndNote that you purchase for $100 or whatever, and some of the functionality is a little bit different. So we do have, I put a link here on the slide to some information. We do have a managing citations section on a research guide that can help you with that. And there's a nice table there on the guide that kind of compares the different reference management tools so that you can make an informed decision as to which one might work best for you. I will say at this point that we have had some challenges with Mendeley lately, so just be aware of that. We tend not to recommend one over the other. Different disciplines prefer one over the other, but I know that we have had some challenges with some of the functionality of Mendeley lately. So you might want to be just aware of that. But they're really nice. For those of you that aren't as familiar with these citation management tools, as I said, you can export references from Google Scholar, from the various databases, even from the library catalog into these tools. You can also manually type them in as well. And then you can create your reference lists in whatever format is offered by the management tool. And usually it's quite a wide range of formats. So whether it's APA, MLA, Chicago, journals now have their specific formats. So quite often those are listed in the management tools as well. So it gives you lots of options, and it takes away some of that challenge of knowing the format, and having to manually do your APA reference list and so on. It doesn't take away the need for you to at least have an awareness of what that style looks like, because it's never going to be 100% accurate. There will always be some little idiosyncrasies that you have to go in and tweak a bit, but generally speaking, it's a real time saver to be able to use a management tool like this to create your reference list at the end of your paper. And as Merle mentioned, I provided a link here to the workshops that the library delivers on these tools, and there will be one on Zotero coming up fairly shortly. My last slide is really a summarizing and synthesizing slide, and I put this in here because when I've done this presentation before, I've had students asking about are there any tools we can use to summarize the information we're finding and to synthesize the information we're finding. So the summarizing tools capture the data itself. It's usually an Excel worksheet, a Google sheet, Word sheet, things of that nature, and I provided some links as to what those look like. And then the synthesizing helps you connect the sources to each other. So you can start seeing patterns or themes in the literature that you're finding. Okay. And then there's also a link to a resource that'll help you summarize and synthesize simultaneously. So whether that's relevant to your needs or not, don't feel that you have to use these resources, but I know that there was some interest in this from some students in another session. So I thought, well, I'll just put together a slide for this, and you can use it at your discretion. Okay. Ultimately, though, no matter where you're at in your literature searching, if you need any kind of help, please don't hesitate to contact your subject librarian. We're more than happy to help you with this. Oh, yeah. Again, these slides will be shared with you, so you will have those links available to you. But certainly, if you have questions about a citation style or why your literature search isn't working properly, or are you using the right database, is your strategy needs some tweaking, anything like that, or if you're finding some strange things, you're not understanding what you're finding, absolutely reach out to us by email. We'll be happy to help you, probably set up just a WebEx session, and then we can go through it, and you can show us what you're doing, and we can talk about where we might need to look at adjusting your search strategy or adjusting where it is you're looking for your information. So absolutely, that's a very important role that the librarians play to help you with your research and your learning. Okay, oh gosh, right, bang on 11:29. I apologize, I didn't leave some more time for questions at the end of this, but certainly if you have questions, get a hold of me, susan.murphy@usask.ca. Any questions about this presentation? And as Merle and I said, it will be made available through the Sure site. The recording will be, and I will send her a PDF of my slides as well. So you'll have that information available to you as well.
Thank you so much, Susan, for doing this presentation for us. And for all the students who joined today, the library is going to be invaluable to you all summer and all through your academic careers and anything else you work on. So this was a great choice, and make sure to keep checking the list of Sure events, because we've got lots of collaborations with library services coming up. So thanks again, Susan.
Okay, and thank you all for your time and your attention, and good luck with your research this summer. Take care, everybody.